All right, 6 o'clock. Travis, Vince, thank you guys for hosting once again. I see a ton of new faces, which is good because one, that means you're either a new client or you're being introduced to us. And we've had a great year as far as new clients, and definitely appreciate you. Definitely appreciate the introductions. Thanks for hanging out with us again tonight. Tonight's going to be a really fun night. It's all Elijah Craig with two private barrels, basically, put in there. So, Vince, Travis, do you guys want to kick us off here? I'm Jason Buehner. Sorry, I should have said that. Financial advisor, Ameriprise. We've got Aaron
with
and Jason.
Traction Wealth Advisors. Make sure you get your name out there too, Jason. Come on.
Yes, thank you. Travis,
I have a quick question though, Jason.
Yes.
You said two are private barrels?
Well, we've got one private single barrel, and then the 18 year is a single barrel. So it's not a private barrel.
Okay.
Single.
But then the 18 year is just it's a single barrel.
Right. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So sorry. That's definitely
Got it.
It's clarifying. But Travis is my business coach. We've been working together for at least 4, if not 5 years now.
Yes, 5 years.
So
well,
Aaron's been on my team a year. Jason's been on since June. Brian joined us tonight. He's a friend. And yeah, looking forward to this. This will be fun. I don't know how blind everything's going to be. I think it's going to be relatively easy just because of what we've got, but it's going to be a fun night.
Well, Jason, thank you again for having Vince and I. Yes, I'm Travis Cheney, and I've been working with Jason and his team we're in our 5th year, and really a pleasure to work with. For those of you who are engaged with Jason's team to help you out with your financial planning, you know that. For those of you who are new, tonight we're going to have fun. We're going to talk about no business, but I would encourage you to reach out to Jason's team and check him out on the financial planning side. So Jason and I, when we first met, bonded immediately over bourbon, which is a great thing to bond over. And so tonight, I think, Jason, is this our 5th tasting?
I think so.
Yes. So we've been hosting the show, showing up, getting paid to drink bourbon. It's a great gig, right, Vince?
Yeah, I love it.
I love it. And so tonight, what we'll do is we'll do some education around bourbon for those of you who may be new to the whiskey and bourbon arena. And Vince is going to do the play-by-play. I kind of do the color commentating here. And then we'll dive in to our tasting. And we want to make it interactive as we go out through the night. So if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We try to look for the yellow, you can hit that raise your button, have a look for that, or just do this or something. And we'll figure out how to get to you and so forth. So especially when we get to the tastings, we want to hear how it hits you, the aroma, the beginning, the finish, how it hits your palate. So that's a part of this tonight as we get going. So Vince is my friend. He's my bourbon mentor. I'm in the coaching and self-help business. So I believe if you want to get good at something, you find somebody who's better than you, and then, tag along and ask them all kinds of questions. So I met Vince probably about 6 or 7 years ago. He runs our local bourbon society. I'll let you tell him about it. And all he does is encourage me to drink and practice to get better at bourbon. So I've been doing that to the point where I now have a bourbon belly, not a beer belly. And it's been a lot of fun. So Vince, why don't you talk a little bit about where your passion started with bourbon? Because
Sure.
we were talking about tequila before everybody got on here. There's a lot of things Vince likes that I like. So, but where did it start for you with bourbon?
Well, I mean, I'm from New Jersey, actually. Originally, I've lived here for the last 15 years. And 11 years ago, I started the Owensboro Bourbon Society, and I really did it just to meet people. I didn't know what it would become. Maybe be 10 people hanging out every month. I really had no idea. So I was a big Scotch drinker in New Jersey. Bourbon in the 90s wasn't really prevalent in New Jersey. It's more prevalent now. And when I moved here, I really got intrigued. I was in Lexington, Kentucky. I was driving back from a seminar, and I saw a sign for Woodford Reserve. So I pulled in and went on a tour. I became fascinated with bourbon. The reason I became fascinated with bourbon is because bourbon, there's an art to it and there's a science to it. I mean, the process is the same, but what a master distiller does within that process is very different. And really, that's what creates a lot of different of the taste profile. So Booker's was my first bourbon that I fell in love with. That's a big one to start at. And so what I did, I went to every distillery in Kentucky 6 or 7 times. I called the guy in Louisville who had a bourbon society there. He was the first bourbon society. I was the second bourbon society. There's probably 15 of them now in Kentucky. We have over 200 members. We meet once a month. In fact, we met last night, and the master distiller for Michter's was our guest speaker last night. So we've had everybody who's anybody in bourbon has come to Owensboro to speak. 2 months ago, we had the master distiller for Heaven Hill Distillery, who makes Elijah Craig. They were a guest speaker. So that's how I fell in love with it. That's it's been a passion ever since. So I would say going on 15 years. And I thought I would start by saying, describing what is bourbon. I mean, that's a start. First I'll say this: bourbon is a whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. So if you think of whiskey, whiskey is a big umbrella. Okay, and under this big umbrella, bourbon sits under that umbrella. Scotch is under that umbrella. Canadian whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Irish whiskey, they're all whiskeys. But bourbon is a whiskey that has certain parameters that have to be followed to be considered a bourbon. So let's start with that. The mash bill. So what a mash bill is, it's the grain formula. How much corn, how much rye, how much barley goes into the mash bill. Most bourbons are made with corn, rye, and barley. Some are made with corn, wheat, and barley instead of the rye. So the rye is not the flavor in. Tonight we're tasting bourbons that are all made with rye. So it's corn, rye, and barley. And I'll get into what the mash bill is of these as we start drinking them. So the first criteria is it must be at least 51% corn. It can be more, but it cannot be less to be a bourbon. That's the first criteria. Second criteria is that it must be aged in new charred oak barrels. And that's very distinctive from other whiskeys. So basically, a bourbon is aged in a new charred oak barrel one time, and the barrel usually is sold to like Scotland or Ireland, where they age Scotch or Irish whiskey, or they use Tabasco sauce in bourbon barrels. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it can only be used once. Very unique, and it also gives it kind of that punch that you're used to. The third criteria is that it cannot be distilled at a higher than 160 proof, and it cannot be put into the barrel at higher than 125 proof. It can be put in less, but it cannot be put in more than that. There can be no color added to bourbon. What you see comes from the barrel. When a bourbon comes off a still, it's clear. It looks like vodka or gin. All the color is coming from the barrel. And the one big misnomer that I think most people think it has to be made in Kentucky. It doesn't. It must be made in the United States. But the best bourbon is made in Kentucky. And actually I think it's 93% of all bourbon is still made in Kentucky. And the reason for that is because of a couple factors. One, we have access to a lot of corn, which you need. The weather conditions are right. We have very hot summers. We have cool, cold winters. So the bourbon aging in the barrel, when it's in the summertime, will expand into the barrel. And in the wintertime, will contract from the barrel. So that's critical. The most critical element, though, is the water. Kentucky sits on a limestone. The whole state is on limestone. And limestone does two things. One, it adds calcium to the water, adds more calcium to the water, but the most important thing is that it extracts iron. You cannot have iron in your water to make a bourbon. It'll turn black if you did. It's also one of the reasons that Kentucky is known for thoroughbred horses, because the additional calcium in water is good for horses' bones. So that's kind of what bourbon is, okay? Do you want to talk specifically about these bourbons, or like where they're from?
Well, I would say, is there any questions about just the process of making bourbon, or what's the difference maybe between a bourbon or like a Scotch? Does anybody have any questions about that? Because one of the things that's unique about, well, it's not just unique, is a lot of these can have finishes. They can be finished in different things. Now tonight, I don't believe anything
No,
are finished, meaning
No.
that we've profiled several bourbons that might be finished in a rum barrel, like an Angel's Envy Rye. It
Right.
might be finished in a Cabernet,
port barrel.
a
are very
port
popular.
barrel.
Yeah.
So they can still be called bourbons, but because they came off.
They're bourbons with a finish in a port barrel.
Right, exactly.
So these bourbons, and we're actually doing 3 bourbons and 1 rye tonight. Okay. The rye that we're doing is different. Why is it a rye instead of a bourbon? It's a rye instead of a bourbon because a rye must be at least 51% rye. So the grain, the mash bill is completely different in this. All of these bourbons and ryes are made at Heaven Hill Distillery. So Heaven Hill Distillery, it's a privately owned distillery. It's owned by Max Shapiro, and they had 5 Shapiro brothers who were in the furniture business, who actually purchased the distillery right after Prohibition, which is interesting. And they made a success of it. And Max Shapiro is one of the sons of the 5 brothers. He still is the president and CEO of the company as it stands today. They distill in Louisville at a place called, it used to be United Distillers. It's now Heaven Hill. But when you go on a tour, you actually go into Bardstown. So their warehousing is in Bardstown. The visitor center, which is beautiful, is in Bardstown. But their actually distillation is taking place in Louisville, Kentucky. And they're actually building another distillery equal to size of that one in Louisville in Nelson County, Kentucky, which is in the Bardstown area. So the distillery was named after William Heaven Hill. He was a farmer who owned the land that Heaven Hill purchased, that the Shapiros purchased. When they purchased the land, William Heaven Hill was obviously one word, Heaven Hill. And when they went to trademark it, it came back as 2 separate words, Heaven and Hill. And they said, you know what, screw it, we'll keep the name so that's why it's Heaven Hill Distillery. They make a lot of different bourbons and ryes. They make Elijah Craig. They make Evan Williams. Evan Williams is, besides Jim Beam, Evan Williams is probably the 2nd most sold bourbon in the country. They do Old Fitzgerald, which is a wheated bourbon they make. They do a lot of different, Henry McKenna, which is a bottled and bond, which is a great bourbon. They do things like Fighting Cock, which is actually a bourbon. I think it's only sold in Kentucky. But they have about 17.
It's a great bottle, by the way.
It is. They have about 17 different bourbons / ryes that they make. So this is kind of their flagship, Elijah Craig. So the bourbons, so we have 3 bourbons. And one's a small batch, one's an 18-year-old, and one's a 10-year-old uncut. So that's going to be a barrel strength, a barrel proof. The small batch is usually at 94 proof. The Elijah Craig 18-year-old is at 90 proof. The uncut, I don't know what the proof is. It's probably in the 120 to 130 range proof, and 1 rye. Okay.
We got 136.1.
136.1. Jason. Yep. Jason's coming to play tonight. Okay, 136.1.
Well, Vincent, it might be interesting. We've got these single barrels. Talk about the difference between what's a single barrel versus a small batch.
Okay.
So that we understand.
So there's actually, because there's a private barrel, I'll speak to that. A small batch bourbon is this. The master distiller will batch different barrels together to create a specific profile. So an Elijah Craig small batch should always taste exactly the same because they can manipulate the barrels to make it taste exactly the same. There are no laws governing how many barrels can go into a batch. It could be like Michter's was there here last night. They say they use 20 barrels. Some use 100 barrels. The only criteria is it's got to be smaller than a regular production, like a Jim Beam White would probably be thousands of barrels. A Baker's small batch has to be less than that. But there's no criteria. But so a small batch is basically different barrels being blended together to create one specific taste profile. A single barrel is historically the master distiller goes in and selects specific barrels that he feels are the best in the warehouse, and they bottle just that barrel. So single barrel is one barrel that's bottled. Because of that, the taste profiles, I mean, it's going to taste very similar. If you drink a Elijah Craig 18-year-old single barrel and you have 10 bottles, it's going to taste pretty similar, but you're going to notice variation because within every barrel there's some variation. Now the 10-year-old uncut is a private barrel. So what that means is that a group, an entity, and I don't know where Jason, where you got it from a liquor store, I'm assuming.
Yeah, this came from Beverage Warehouse in Michigan.
Okay. So representatives from Beverage Warehouse in Michigan went to Heaven Hill Distillery. They put out 5 barrels and you choose one and they bottle that and they bottle it at cask strength. So you're getting it right out of the barrel. That's the 10-year-old that we're having this evening. Okay. And that's so we have a single barrel in Elijah Craig. We have a private barrel, which is always a single barrel. It's one barrel with the 10-year-old. We have a small batch Elijah Craig, and then we have a small batch rye. Okay. The mash bill for the bourbons for the small batch, the 18-year-old, and the uncut is exactly the same. It's the exact same bourbon when it comes off the still. The difference in flavor profiles are going to be one's a single barrel, one's small batch. The proof points are different, and the aging is different. So that's going to give you, and obviously one proof point's way
Way
high,
off, yeah.
way high. All right, that's going to give you different taste profiles. It also where they age the barrels in the warehouse will affect flavor as well. So and the master still knows all this. They know, like, you know, we like level 3 and 4 in this warehouse for our single barrels. We know we like these 4 warehouses. We like to pull out at least 25 barrels in these areas for a small batch, and then we'll figure it out. We'll manipulate it to that exact profile. The mash bill for the bourbons is 78% corn, 10% rye, and 12% barley. So for the Elijah Craig small batch, the Elijah Craig 18, and the uncut, the 10-year-old, that's the mash bill. That's what you're going to be tasting. 78% corn, 10% rye, 12% barley. For the rye, and the rye has to be 51% corn, rye, and it's exactly 51% rye. It's 35% corn, and it's what's that, 14%?
I have to get my calculator out.
35, 15, I think it's 14% barley. Whatever's left over
Yeah,
from
it'd be
51 and
14,
35. 14% barley. So a completely different mash bill. Okay.
By the way, that's not, I don't know if you've heard the term high rye. So this is like, is there a term like low rye? Because I mean, you're right at the minimum.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, well, from a rye perspective, well, let me back up. A lot of people address bourbons as high rye bourbons and low rye bourbons, okay? This would be the bourbon would be pretty much a low rye bourbon, a 10% rye in it. That's low rye for
Right.
a bourbon. For rye, it's they don't call it low rye, but yeah, that's the minimum for rye. So you're going to get a lot of bourbon characteristics in the rye. There are other ryes that are 95% rye,
Right.
like Bullet rye. If you ever had that, that's 95% rye. You get a whole different taste profile in that arena. You get a lot of mintiness, herbal quality when the higher the rye goes. So the rye is, while it's 51% rye, which is a big difference between the 10% rye and the bourbon, it's still going to hold some bourbon characteristics. Any questions before we start tasting? And I'll talk about what I do when I taste.
I'd say we pour the first one.
All right.
So we have
We're going to start with blue.
Blue.
So I'm using a Glencairn glass. Use whatever you like. These are whiskey glasses made in Scotland. And I always nose the bourbon. And I'm looking to pull out. I mean, I go back and forth between one nostril to another because my left nostril smells something different than my right nostril. I don't know why I get more citrus on my left nostril than I do on my right nostril. So
I think sniffing all that bourbon is
That's
probably
probably it.
altered
Might have.
your nostrils.
When you nose the bourbon, part your lips, and I actually breathe in through my mouth. So I'll put it to my nose, but I'm breathing in through my mouth, because if you don't part your lips and you just put your nose in and go, you're going to paralyze your nostrils, your taste buds. It's a high proof bourbon. So just part your lips minimally. I actually breathe in through my mouth. And then you should be able to pick up. I get some nuts, some caramel, vanilla.
Oh, I tasted it already. I just did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I followed you, Travis.
Well, when I taste, I always go with this criteria: less is more. Don't put a lot in your mouth. Put a little bit in your mouth, swirl around your tongue, swallow, and then I pay attention to the front, the mid, and the back. The sweetness will hit you in the front of the palate, because your tongue sensories taste sweetness up front. If there's bitterness or tannins, that'll be on the side, and then look for the finish. How long is the finish? Is it short? Is it long? Is it vanilla? Is it sweet? Is it dry? So now I'm gonna taste it now. So I'm gonna stop talking for a second.
Well, and Vince, one thing to point out with what you're talking about on your tongue, we've mentioned this before, but unless you try it, you don't really experience it. But Maker's Mark tries to push everything to the front of your tongue. Like it's such a different
It is.
profile. So,
Yeah, I mean, and that's what they want to do, and that's a great point, Jason. Because like I said before, the master distiller, whether you like a bourbon or don't like a bourbon, the master distiller is doing something, is making it to their preference. And Maker's Mark, when they were established in 1954, there were a lot of bad bourbons on the market. So their profile, they don't use rye, they use wheat. So they use corn, wheat, and barley, and they didn't want a long finish. They wanted to push everything to the front of your palate. So the next time you taste a Maker's Mark, a regular Maker's Mark, swallow it and just sit there, and I guarantee you're going to see the flavor is going to be pushed to the front of your palate. That's how they want to. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, I get a little bit of spice and nutmeg.
I get a little baking spice too.
I'd say this is more a medium finish. It's not a long finish. It's certainly not pushing it back up. I mean, it's lingering for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very sweet finish. Nothing. I don't get a quintessential burn that sometimes you might have in something younger or maybe spicier.
Yeah,
It's
the
pretty-
finish, I get a little vanilla on the finish. I always get with any Elijah Craig a little bit of hazelnut. I mean, that's just me. The other thing is this: everybody's palate is different. So what I get, you may not get, and what you get, I may not get. There's no right or wrong here. You taste what you taste, and I taste what I taste, and that's the way it is. So
Yeah.
don't be intimidated by, if I'm getting something you're not, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know, Jason, did you include a flavor wheel with the tasting you did? Yeah, well,
not this time.
not this time. Okay. One of the things you may want to do, especially if you're starting out in bourbon, I know it was helpful for me, is you can just go to Google and push, bourbon flavor wheel, and you'll be able to, it'll give you a wheel, and it'll break it down into things like wood, spice, sweet, and so forth,
Yeah.
and nuts, and then it'll give you a different subset of that. So as you're tasting things, and it was hard early on for me to I knew it was nutty, but I couldn't figure out, and then I have a reference.
Yeah.
I could do that. So
Power of suggestion is very powerful. Like you could be tasting something, and I could say, I get like, I'm making it up, I get a little orange zest, and then you might get orange zest because I said because you're looking for, you're like, oh, okay, that's what I was tasting. Here I'm getting more caramel, little nuttiness, vanilla on the back. On the nose, I get a little bit of an orange zest on the nose, but don't get it on the palate. It's very nice. It's to me, I drink this, it's well balanced.
Makes you look silly though.
It's a quintessential bourbon.
Yeah, and tonight, I mean, I knew this lineup. So the last one we did were all mash bill 1 from Buffalo Trace. And we had all single barrels. So that was very, very unique and different. This one, I think we're going to be able to pick out relatively easy which one's which, but it's trying that whole mash bill and
I love when
tasting
people
the
say that.
difference.
say what?
This is gonna be easy. I love when people say it's gonna be easy.
Really,
I
what
had-
Jason is saying is he drinks a lot of bourbon.
That's right. It's gonna be easy for Jason.
So for me, yes, it will probably be easy. I know Jason Marsh here is worried about being able to tell the 18 from the 94 shelfer that you can just buy at Kroger.
Okay.
Well, let's hear it. Jason, call on some of your clients and friends here.
What do you think of number one?
Yeah.
Does anybody have an opinion either on what this is?
You guys can unmute and join in if you want to. Having trouble seeing who all is on here right now, but Scott, Joseph, I see you on here.
Back to large gallery. This is so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people who've been on here for the 5th time. Cheers to you.
I know Scott. I've seen him a lot. He's not shy.
Yeah, Scott, what's going on? You haven't spoken yet? Come on, man.
It's how's everybody this evening? I like it. It's something that I would put on the bottom shelf for friends, close friends only. I think the finish was a little longer. I know you mentioned it was mild, but I thought it was a little longer for me. I did taste.
Yeah.
So I like this one very much, but I need to reserve myself until I taste the other 3.
Understood.
Who else has maybe some notes to share with us?
I got a question.
Wait, are you on mute?
I got a question.
Go ahead.
So how important is it to get a new glass when you're going from, whiskey to whiskey or making the change? Like, how much is what's left in this glass going to affect my tasting? Because they're all delicious to me.
Well, are you finishing it? Are you finishing the glass first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
I mean, this is just a personal opinion. I don't think it makes that big a difference.
Okay.
I do.
Yet he has 4 different glasses.
I do have 4 different. But the
Shocking.
reason I have 4 different glasses is because I want them to open up at the same time.
Yeah.
So if I'm drinking it at my house, I have 1 glass and I'll drink 5 different bourbons in the same glass. When you pour a bourbon, that's a good point. The worst pour is the first pour. Like they call the neck pour. That's the worst pour that when you buy a bottle of bourbon, that's the worst pour you're going to get because it's not oxidized yet. Oxygen helps it. Oxygen opens it up. Water can open up too if it's too hot for you. But the neck pour is always like, it's okay. But once the oxygen gets into the bottle, and I open them up, the oxygen is getting into these now. It opens up the bourbons. That's why I pour all 4.
So you'll hear Vince come back at the end of the tasting and he'll go and taste things he previously tasted. So if you're doing a tasting like that, it's not a bad practice.
Yeah.
Not to finish all of it at once, put it aside, and then come back after the air's hit it. You want to talk a little bit about how the water, as we're doing our tasting tonight, if you want to change the dynamic of the bourbon.
If you want to change the dynamic of the bourbon or one's just too hot for you, add a couple drops of water. I always do like 2 drops of water just to see what happens, and it'll open it up. The molecular structure of the bourbon is going to change because you added water to it, and it can open it up. Most times for the good, but sometimes not for the good.
Come on,
So,
don't mess with
don't.
adding water. Come on, folks.
Well,
There again, Scott drinks a lot of bourbon. He's a neat guy. That's what he's saying.
Well, and Travis, what I'll say on that too, like you'll notice, you'll probably pick out the really high proof because these are all 90s, except for one. You're probably going to pick out the really high proof one. And if you put a drop of water in, it might open it up and just change the profile totally.
Exactly.
So we have 2 glasses here tonight because I don't have enough for 4 for everybody here. But if there's something that I really like, I'm kind of holding on to it and I want to come back to it. I'm just pushing that to the side and just, I'll come back to it when it opens up a little bit. So we're just using 2 glasses here.
Well, and Scott, I have some friends who aren't as invested in bourbon as I am, and I'll go over and they'll pour me something from the bottom shelf and think it's something really good. And so, I'll add some water when there's, the flavor profile is not there. I can tell you tonight, these, I'm not sure I would add anything to them. That's just me. But I know we're tasting.
I definitely wouldn't add it to the one that's not uncut. The 130 proof one, I could add some water to it. Yeah, we'll see how it tastes. Or if this is the 131 proof, 131 proof tastes pretty good.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that age
Yeah.
statement, how much that mellows the high proof though.
Yep. Number 2 is the green. We're doing green at number 2. Does anybody want to take a guess at what number 1 was, by the way? Or you want to reserve it till you taste a few of them?
Is that gentleman down there? Is he in a fire? Is there a fire going on?
I think he's got a fire going on.
Yeah, I think
that-
Jeff's outside hanging
Yeah,
out.
very nice.
Nice.
Very nice.
That's how you drink bourbon right there.
That's right. We're having it at your place next time.
That's that's fine. I guess I've watched too many cowboy movies. I'm drinking it straight from the bottle.
Well, that's interesting.
So are we on green?
Green.
You already smell a little more spice to this one.
Yep. I get a little more herbal quality to this, a little spicy.
You know, if I could just ask, because I've never done this before, so I'm absolutely a newbie to this. Would you look at the glass the way you would a glass of wine? So would you look for legs? Is there a different, not glycerin, I'm not sure there's glycerin in it, but is there a way to investigate the glass as you start to give you any kind of,
Yeah.
you know, jump start on what it could be after the
Yeah.
fact? Or am I just mixing apples and
No,
oranges?
no, that's a great question. No, the glass can tell you certain things. There are legs to bourbon, so you know, usually the higher proof, the more legs. But also you get the color.
Sure.
The color is a giveaway. The color can tell you 2 things. One, it can tell you age. You would think that a bourbon that's out in the barrel for 18 years would be darker than a bourbon that's out there for 10 years. And the other is proof. The higher the proof, the less the water, which means it should be darker. So those are 2 things you can look at to kind of get a feel for. If it's a very dark color, it might be high proof or it might be old.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So Travis, when I drink an old fashioned anymore, I usually order a rye. Just to spice up the old fashioned a little bit instead of having just a standard bourbon. Like that's been my go-to here the last year or so.
Well, it offsets the sweetness.
I
From-
do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well,
So this one, Vince, I don't know. I get some cinnamon,
I get cinnamon in this.
get some
I
black,
get-
a little black pepper.
I get a little clove back.
Ooh.
it's certainly not as smooth as the first one. This one bit a little bit.
Yep.
But it's got that bite. It's a spice though. You know, it's
What-
not like a young bourbon's bite. It's a,
What- What's the spice? I don't taste the spice.
well, I got what you just said.
I
Bitter.
get a little clove. I mean, a little cinnamon. I get a little mintiness.
I get that on the finish.
Yeah. It is definitely spicier, Scott. It tickles your tongue more than the first one did.
What, Jason, let's talk to some other people here. What's the aroma people are getting? How's it hitting the palate?
Jim,
Yeah.
Jim Squire, you out there? I see you. You've been on here a couple times now. You're muted. There you go.
I added a little water to the second one, which I didn't on the first. And I think so far I like the second one better, just because I opened it up. And I actually poured all of them now just to have them all opened up, ready to go. The first one I just poured straight out of the little bottle and went at it. So I'm glad I opened these up and letting them breathe a little bit.
So you're saying number 2, Jim's your favorite so far?
Okay.
I really
Hey,
like
John.
2.
John, see you and Danielle there. I think this is the first one you guys have joined. Maybe.
Yeah, this is our first one. We both actually like the blue sticker, the first one we did, in comparison.
You know, when I add water to this one, Jim, I don't know if you got the same thing. I get more on the nose. I get more like a menthol and a little bit of smokiness that I didn't get before I added the water.
So I think that's giving us a hint on the mash bill.
Jason,
Sorry.
Your
Yeah.
power of suggestion. Yeah, I was getting.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And Drew's back
Jason's
with
just
us
trying to
again.
help everybody get it right. That's all.
Yeah.
Drew always loves participating in these, at least being on camera.
Yeah. I always love it.
Anybody else comments on number 2?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I like number 2. I'm not as professional as you guys are, but the first one I just thought seemed kind of acidy to me. But number 2 I really liked. And I could taste the cinnamon and like cloves maybe.
Mhm.
But it definitely was more forefront on my tongue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very.
I'm going to give it a delicious rating tonight.
All right. All right.
Actually,
I
I'm no connoisseur. I like bourbon, but this one tasted a lot richer to me and
Okay.
fuller.
Wow, thanks of pumpkin pie.
Seemed like the finish was a lot longer on the second one too. At least I thought.
It's still there.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mhm.
I think you're right.
It's like coat your mouth more.
Ready to go to number 3? Number 3 is red.
Or out.
Okay, Thompson have to split his freeways.
If you want, you can rinse.
Yeah,
Here's
it's the menage a trois.
Swapping banks on a little bit of time.
That's dreamy.
That's red.
I get deep, rich caramel in the nose.
Oh yes, it's rich and caramel and almost a little bit of like a light milk chocolate.
Yeah. Yep. It's decadent.
Yeah, this definitely smells a lot more like just deeper. Yeah.
Smells like candy.
Yeah, this one tastes a lot sweeter.
And Vince, you talked about in barrels, like bourbon has to be what, 4 years old?
No,
At least
bourbon
4
is-
years old?
No, that's a great question, Jason. Bourbon is bourbon as soon as it hits the barrel. To be a straight bourbon, it's got to be 2 years old. So when you see on the label it says Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, or say Oregon Straight Bourbon Whiskey, if it says straight bourbon, it's got to be at least 2 years old. If it's less than 4 years old, they have to tell you how old it is. So if a bourbon is 3 years old, on the label, it has to tell you it's 36 months or it's 3 years. Once it hits 4 years old, they do not have to tell you the age statement on a bourbon. So if there's no age statement, it's at least 4 years old. If there is an age statement, like the 18-year-old we're drinking this evening, that means the youngest bourbon in that bottle has to be 18 years old. It can be older, but it cannot be younger. So whenever you see an age statement, if it's 12 years old, it has to be at least 12 years old. It can be older, cannot be younger. But there's no age statement. It's got to be at least 4 years old.
And one of those random finishing things that you see going on in bourbon, with bourbon companies right now anyways, is like some will have it on the label how long it's been finished in like a sherry barrel or a certain type of finish. Others don't. So if it's on the barrel or if it's on the bottle and it says it was there 6 months, a year, like, if it wasn't, it could have been in there a week and they said it was finished in a sherry barrel or
Exactly.
certain type of flavor.
Yep.
Wow.
And that
So
really originated in
I got a
Scotland.
question, guys.
Okay.
So I went to New York City, and there's Kings County bourbon, and so I went through their whole thing, and they barrel theirs in like, God, they're small, maybe 5-gallon barrels.
Yep.
And so they told me they age theirs 18 months because it's a smaller barrel. They get the same effect as the Kentucky distilleries who age it, 6 years or whatever. And so I wasn't impressed with their operation, but nevertheless, it was an experience. I mean, is that accurate? 18 months?
But they could do it 18 months. I have to tell you, it's 18 months. I'm not a big fan of aging in small barrels because I think that you have so much bourbon hitting the barrel. You basically to me, you get a big wood blast, and you don't get the intricacies of like the caramels and the vanillas. You're just getting a lot of wood, is what I found. You don't get the depth of flavor that you would. In Kentucky, they use 53-gallon barrels, and that's fairly standard. I think a lot of distilleries used to do that when they first started. A lot have moved away from the 5 or 10-gallon barrels because, in my opinion, and this is just mine, I've tasted a lot of stuff in those barrels. I've never been impressed with one of them.
Plus, I think the whole artisan approach you were talking about, the artist part of creating it. Yep. They're robbing.
Well, that's
us by shortening the process, which is what they're doing.
They're telling you that it ages faster because more wood is hitting the bourbon, so they can age for 18 months. That's really like aging it for 6 years. One thing I've discovered is, you know what? You cannot accelerate time. It just doesn't happen. It's 6 years. It's 6 years. All that does is it puts a lot of wood in your bourbon right away, and it stays there, and that's what it does. The color might get as dark as a 6-year-old or 10-year-old bourbon in Kentucky, but the flavor is not there.
So Vince, this one's really complex compared to the first two, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, this has got a lot going on.
It's got
what
so
color
much
are we
going
on? I missed the transition. What color are we doing?
We're on red.
Oh, thank you.
Well, why do you say it's complex, Jason? I kind of have my own take on that, but I'm curious.
I'm feeling it
share with us.
I feel it all over my tongue.
Yep.
And the finish is just different than the first two. This one's not spicy, but I'm tasting a lot of different flavors that I didn't taste, especially in the first one. This one seems a little older to me.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you, Jason. This one, it's almost got the sweet profile to it, especially the way it kind of goes front to back on your tongue.
Seems
Jason,
to have.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
A
go ahead.
very silky finish.
Mm-hmm.
Is the way I would describe it. Very smooth and silky all over the tongue type. It's not, like you said, not the bitey.
Mouthfeel, yeah.
And listening to Aaron and Jason to my left here, they both seem to really like this one.
Yeah.
Compared to the last two.
I told Jason a second ago, green, he was laughing because it tasted like dirt to me. I don't know about anybody else, but I felt like I was drinking mulch. Jason had to mute us because we were laughing. That's what I was getting. I think Mitch liked the second one, so he can have mine next time.
Well, the complexity for me is the aroma and the taste is different, and that's to me what I like. If I smell something like we were talking about, the chocolate and the real deep vanilla, and then now it's hit me like honey, and it's got that nutty.
Cherry.
And it's changing through the senses. And to me, I love that in a bourbon where it's got this huge variety between the nose and the taste.
Yeah. It's got the viscosity to, I can't, is it Norma? You said it's thicker in the mouth. It's got more viscous. It's kind of more syrupy. and it's more nuanced to me. I mean, I get a lot of things coming in and out. It's this bourbon. This is a bourbon that you'd want to sit down and think about when you're drinking it. There's a lot going on, a lot of nuanced flavor here. It's delicious.
Yeah.
A lot of flavors are going. A lot of again, I taste licorice. It's a little heavy for me.
Wow.
Yeah, the first one, even second one for me, I think I could mix, not drink as straight. Maybe not the second one as much, but the first one would be, I think, more of a mix. This one definitely not. I'm sitting down and drinking it, either straight or with a little bit of an ice cube or something.
Was it your favorite so far?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I was going to ask, what's this number 3? Who's favorite so far? Number 3.
Number 3 is number 1 here.
Number 3 is number 1.
Number 1. Red is
Oh wow,
red is one.
we're getting a lot of hands there. Well, there goes my plea for anybody to send their leftovers to me. Thanks.
Worth a try.
Worth a try.
I know you really like that single barrel Eagle Rare we had last time.
Well, it made me think of, what was the bottom shelf one that we had that day?
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh my God.
It was.
Oh,
Was it the foolproof?
Benchmark.
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 Yeah. Yeah. That's the one I think people sent to us.
Yeah. I use that as lighter fluid.
Right.
It kind of blew
I
us out
started
at
a
the
fire
end.
Yeah.
like Jeff with it not too long ago.
Yeah.
I think this red one is one I could probably sit here by the fire and drink it all night long. The very first one had more bite to it. So on the tip of the tongue, actually, the first one. So I think it probably was a higher proof. This one's probably more of one of the generic Elijah Craig's. Maybe, not sure which one. I don't think it's the barrel proofed.
Okay. All right. Well, we're about ready to get to the moment of truth. We're going to get to the last one.
Last
Then we're going
one.
to see how people's palate at least matches up with guessing which ones they've tasted in what order.
So the last one is yellow. Throw it out there. Wow.
You've got more smell.
It does, absolutely, absolutely so. If this were just sniffed in,
Light cherry,
this would,
vanilla.
this would crush them.
Yeah, that's Cliff. What do you think?
A little bit of honey.
Hey, Cliff, what do you think of this one?
This one hit pretty hard there right out of the bat. It seemed a little higher alcohol to me.
What about the smell before you tasted it?
The first smell that hit me was vanilla on this one.
That's nice.
The taste, I haven't pinpointed what I'm tasting yet.
The finish is really long.
Very long.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's got a long finish. You're right.
Nice.
Not quite as peppery as
Sweet
that second
quality
one
to it.
was.
Because it mellows
Yeah.
the longer.
Yeah.
Because that was a nice burn.
Yeah.
I like the burn. It's
Yeah.
a very spiced burn. It's not it's not there again, a young whiskey that hadn't found its flavor yet burn. That's
No, Travis, this hits you like really hard up front and then mellows quickly.
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
there again, something complexity wise. I love a bourbon like this. It's got a sweet scent. It hits you hard right out of the gate, and then it loses, any of that strong forward spice. It's mellowing out.
Yeah, so without giving it away, these are the bourbons that I'm into. Because I can tell which one this is, but
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
what I can have all night.
I don't think I bring this out for my guest. I think I keep it for myself.
Agreed. I could have it all night.
Pam, are
I
you
get
drinking
a lot
these,
of
or is it just
classics
Jim and
in this one.
Mhm.
And I get it.
There's
Jay?
definite sweetness.
There's a chocolate. Good chocolate.
Mm,
That's a, and on the palate, right in the mid palate.
Are you drinking the wine tonight?
I just love that first punch. I mean, wow.
Let you know it's there.
Oh, it's there. Hey, baby.
Funny how they
Look at me.
so
Yeah.
different.
I'm here.
I'm here.
The same
You haven't
stuff,
tasted
same
it
starting
yet.
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Get ready.
It's different. It's
Yeah, I
different.
think that this is interesting because it's probably
So what do you guys
Yeah.
think about this
high
one?
proof, but bold.
It'd help you get over a long day. at work.
Say new favorite.
Yes.
New
Yeah,
favorite? Oh, we have a
absolutely.
new number one.
Yeah, I'm a 4-3-1-2 guy on the in the order of favorites.
Hey, George.
Huh.
How's this compared to the other tastings? I know you've been on a few of these.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I like the previous one, just because I'm a Buffalo Trace kind of guy. But
This one does hit you hard up front.
yeah, it definitely hits you up. This one hits hard up front,
Yeah.
and it has a real short
Don't care.
finish.
I gotta say, I think that red was the best. I'm going with the red was the best. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I like the red. I like the red the best.
Everybody's saying I like the red. Yeah.
I like that punch in the mouth up front.
Punch in the mouth.
Who wouldn't want that?
So Vince, what's awesome is we can try like the same mash bill, and you get a small batch, you get a barrel proof single barrel, you get an 18-year-old single barrel, and then thrown in the rye, which is a different mash bill. But I mean, you can see that every one is completely different. And that's why it's fun to try. Just test bourbons, taste different bourbons.
Well, I want to see if people can guess at which one was the rye.
All right, let's do it that way.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's see if you can guess which one do you think was the rye.
I'm gonna guess 2.
I guess
Number
the
2.
green.
Two.
Green.
2.
Yeah, call out a color. I'm
Green.
number blind, but color is
Green.
fine. Green.
Hell, they're
Green?
all empty.
Yeah.
Yellow. That was my guess too.
Green.
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 And you are
I think the green.
correct.
Correct. Green is the rye. Green is the Elijah Craig rye. So 51%
The
rye,
yellow
35% corn.
I think we need to review the rye again.
Feel free.
What color? I will
I'm
say
sorry,
this.
which
I
color
just,
was the rye?
To Jason's point, I love
Green.
this rye with in an old fashioned. This particular one too.
Should try that.
Yeah.
So Vince, I'll tell you, I think the next tasting I'm going to put together is going to be all rye. And it'll be a variety of single barrel ryes.
That's
No,
awesome. That's awesome.
don't do that.
Oh, you'll love it. Be open minded, you'll love
Was
it.
that Scott? Come on, Scott.
Oh no, don't do that.
Taste that now.
All right, so which one do we want to guess next? I like that. Let's just guess.
Okay, let's say which one do you think is the 10-year-old barrel strength?
1.
Get the
Yellow.
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 Yellow?
Yellow.
Somebody thinks it's blue.
No.
I think it's blue. The rye.
Somebody says blue, and most say yellow.
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 blue or yellow.
The longer it goes, the more.
Those who are saying yellow are correct.
Yep.
Oh, yellow?
The
Yellow
one-
is the uncut. So this is a 10-year-old, 131 point, 131 or 136.
134.1.
Wow. 134.1.
This
Right out
one
the barrel.
helps me deal with my wife's credit card bill.
No,
These are very nice.
So, so Vince, I like the really high proof, like barrel strength type.
Of course we do.
barrel. I mean, I did. That's not what I was into initially, but that's definitely that's what I prefer. And what's interesting is like when I've given Melissa a King of Kentucky or a George T. Stagg or something, she loves it because of the complexity. And even though it's high proof, she loves it. But she loves Buffalo Trace too.
Yeah.
It's the high proof is why she likes it, Jason, just letting you know.
I'm with you, Jason. I prefer high proof too. And if it's too hot, I'll bring it down with water. But usually it's not.
All right, so then we're down to 2.
We're down to the small batch and the 18-year-old. So let's talk about which one do you think is the 18-year-old? Blue
Red.
or red?
Red.
Red.
Gotta be red for sure.
I told you it would be easy.
You are correct.
Correct, Jason. You were right. This is pretty easy. Most people got these.
Yeah, I figured this was going to be an easy like pick as far as you know what the bottles are. You know what the proof. We had a rye. There's a shelfer. There's a really old one.
Yep.
And it's just trying to taste what you can buy from Elijah Craig and just the differences in like if you like number 1, you can go to the store and pick it up at any Kroger in Ohio. Yep. If you like number 2, you can pick it up at any Kroger in Ohio. You'll never find number 3 unless you stand in line and you know it's coming and you're there at 6 in the morning at Kroger.
They're all small batches.
And the last one, I mean, it was 1 barrel, so there were like 100 and some bottles. So you're not going to find that again.
So I'll tell you a story. Last week, my wife and I were traveling to Eastern Kentucky, and on the way we said, let's stop at Heaven Hill Distillery. So we did a tour, and at Heaven Hill they have a tour where you taste their barrel strength Elijah Craig, the barrel strength Larceny, and the barrel strength Bernheim Wheated, and you pick which one you like the best, and you actually bottle it yourself, which is awesome. But so we knew we were going to do that. But the interesting thing is, to Jason, they were actually dropping Elijah Craig 18 that day. So we walked in, and there was a line of people. And like, what's the line of people for? It was for the Elijah Craig 18. So I jumped on that line and got an Elijah Craig 18.
Wow. Hell yeah.
Which is red.
So you mentioned Evan Williams, right?
Yes.
Is in this line. So one of my all-time favorite tastes ever was the Evan Williams 23. I don't know what year it was, but it was like a grape soda bomb. And man, I want another one of those, but it retails like at the distillery for what, $500?
Yeah.
No, so Jason, I'll make you jealous. I got 2 of those. So Evan Williams has a tasting room in downtown Louisville.
Yep.
They actually have a speakeasy in the basement as a part of the tour. If you want that or part of the tasting, it's totally cool. They've got the basement. It looks like it's 1931. The bartender's in character, and so you get a little bit of history. And the last one on the tasting is the 23-year-old. So 2 years ago, I bought one for $275 retail. I did it 2 years before that, so 4 years ago it was $235.
Yeah, it's like $500 retail now, right?
It's higher now.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I bought it at the tasting.
They have
room,
they have a downtown distillery as well.
So you tasted it, right?
Yes, I've not opened the bottles, but I've tasted it. Yes.
Did you get that grape soda flavor in that particular batch?
I think that one. I remember and this was a long time ago since I tasted. I got like a cognac kind of thing going on with that.
Yeah, I don't. I would have remembered grape soda,
which is made with grapes. But I remember that I got like a cognac thing on that 23-year-old.
So somebody gave me an eagle, like a double Eagle Rare, an Evan Williams 23, and I had a Pappy in there. And my favorite was the Evan Williams 23, which is still the same mash bill, right? Or is it different mash bill?
No, it's as Elijah Craig. It's the same mash bill.
Yeah, like that was my favorite, and one of those bottles goes for like 20 grand. On secondary.
So if you want to get us a gift,
client gifts are coming.
With Jason as my advisor, no problem.
There we go.
There you go. Nice. Hey, Jason, just saying the holiday pie. Let's do, send that bottle out there. Right?
Well, let's start doing bourbon samples with pies, I guess.
That would be good.
There you go.
So, Travis, Vince, awesome job tonight. Thank you so much for hosting again. Like, this is always fun. I know we got a couple scheduled for next year. Like I said, next one's probably going to be a rye, but thanks for everybody that showed up tonight. Thanks for inviting your guests. Like, it's a fun way to meet people that we normally don't get to meet in a weird, like, virtual way. But yeah, awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, for
Great
having
job.
us.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
gonna be in
Thank
Jeff's
you.
backyard next time by the fire.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Thank you all. Have a great
I'm
great
in.
night. Drive home
Good night.
safely. Oh wait, you're already there.
Come on,
Yeah.
man.
We just
Thank
need the
you.
GPS coordinates, Jeff. We just need the GPS coordinates.
I'll send you a pin.